And I would now give the floor to India.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the very outset, I would like to thank the delegation of Estonia and all the co-sponsors for organizing this meeting. I also thank the briefers for sharing their insights on this issue. Mr. President, Mahatma Gandhi had once said, and I quote, "If we are to teach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children." While children constitute a third of humanity, they make all of its future. It is a common and primary responsibility to protect them as they remain most susceptible to suffering and vulnerable to volatilities. Over the last 2 decades, the UN Security Council has actively engaged in this pursuit, and significant progress has been achieved to protect children in armed conflict situations. However, grave violations against children persist, and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has compounded the challenges the children in conflict situations are faced with. Mr. President, the pandemic has exacerbated the complex challenges for protection of children in armed conflicts, which calls for determined actions by the member states. In this regard, my delegation wishes to submit the following suggestions for the Council's consideration. First, protecting the rights of the child as mandated under the Convention of the Rights of the Child is the primary responsibility of every government. The Security Council must do all that is possible to support efforts of governments in this regard. Second, school closures due to the pandemic have made children vulnerable to radicalization and indoctrination to violent extremist ideologies by terrorists and other non-state actors. An increase in the recruitment and use of children by these actors is imminent. This poses a severe security threat and calls for a greater attention by the Council to take measures to check this phenomena. Third, there is a need for a coordinated approach to child protection agenda and counter-terrorism. Terrorist outfits and individuals proscribed by the Council are directly or indirectly responsible for abusing child rights. Member states need to demonstrate greater political will to hold the perpetrators of terrorism and the sponsors to account to fulfill the Council's child protection obligations. Fourth, the pandemic has demonstrated the power of technology, which enabled us to continue with our efforts to monitor, report, and prevent grave violations against children. The digital revolution, for example, has to be pressed into service for the protection of the child. The international community must seize this momentum to use the full potential of technology to fulfill hitherto unkept promises to the children. Fifth, we need a more inclusive approach to provide protection of child victims of armed conflicts. Children who grow up in conflict and post-conflict situations often need a fresh start. Support to national governments to strengthen legal and operational tools for child protection is important in this context. Last but not the least, we need to provide children with hope. Those children caught in the pandemic as victims and nowhere to turn to need to be reassured about their future and that their hopes and aspirations are not lost due to the impact of the pandemic. It's the role of the governments and the civil society to work in concert to ensure this. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to commend the UN agencies, peacekeeping missions, and other partners for their efforts in mitigating the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and in facilitating humanitarian assistance. Protection of children must continue to receive priority in responding to the pandemic in armed conflicts. India reaffirms its firm commitment and steadfast support to UN endeavors to protect children in situations of armed conflict. I thank you, Mr. President.